Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. Today, we have a special episode, once again focused on probably one of my favorite fandoms of recent, within probably at least the last 10, 20, 30 years. Who knows? It's been out for at least almost 20 at this point, I think. I could be wrong. I don't have dates in front of me. I'm just winging this. But we are here to talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender and its sequel / spinoff, The Legend of Korra. And joining me today is previous guest Kris Lozano, who was on episode 174, where we talked about Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts and cosplay. But Kris was like, I need to come on and talk about my love for Avatar. And I said, sure, why not? It's been 3 years since we had an Avatar episode, and now that it's back on Netflix for everyone to get into the fandom yet again, it's a perfect time. So how are you doing again today, Kris?
Hello, I'm doing great. I'm so excited. I didn't know it was 3 years since you last did an Avatar episode. It makes me feel a little better about bringing up the subject again.
That's right. Well, at the time, 3 years ago, I was binging it with my kids and my wife, who they'd never seen it all the way through, especially my kids, because they were like 7 and 6 years old at the time. So I was introducing them to both of this, or to Avatar. They haven't seen Korra yet. And then a friend that I had recorded with way back in 2016, so pretty much like 4 years ago, he was binging it at the same time. So it's like, oh yes, let's get together and talk about it. And to this day, as we're recording now, it's one of the best and more popular episodes that has ever been released, because I think it has to do with how amazing Avatar is as a series. And I'm glad to now, like, it's back on Netflix now, and I'm seeing so many people talking about it and getting into it, and it's like perfect timing, just like, because we were talking about doing it before they were bringing it back, and now it's like it's back and we can talk about it, and it's like in sync.
Right? I think the stars aligned. Chosen's Comet is back. But let's talk about it. And for the record, it's been 15 years since it came out.
Has it been that long? Like 15 years?
It
Okay.
came out in 2005.
Oh my gosh, it's the anniversary. What?
Yeah, I actually posted a cosplay photo on the actual day of the anniversary. I think it was somewhere in April or something.
Wow. Yes, it first came out.
I remember.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, because I remember watching it. Let's see here. First episode 2005. Dang. What was I doing in 2005? Where was I? Oh, I was living in Japan in 2005.
Okay, that explains it.
Yeah, that explains why it's like, oh yeah, I definitely know that I missed some stuff when I was in Japan watching TV over there. But man, so it's been around for 15 years.
That's right.
I'd love to know how you got into Avatar. Like, were you somebody who watched it on Nickelodeon when it was airing?
Yeah, surprisingly I was. 'Cause my siblings, I have 4 of them, and they're all really athletically inclined. So when they saw like a show based around martial arts and Asian martial arts, they were really excited about it. And I don't know, it didn't seem like my style at the time, but like I kind of warmed up into it with them, so we kind of watched it together. Like each week it would come out, and I remember once we got deeper into it, we like it was like one of those things where we all just agreed that we liked it, because we agree on very few things.
Mm-hmm.
The 5 of us are so different in personality that we don't always agree on things. There's like one band in the entire world that we agree on, and this is like one show in the entire world that all 5 of us agree on. So that was basically it. And then after that, we just kind of kept going, and we each developed our own personalities, like depending on the elements. So it was one of those things where you can kind of pick your find your personality.
Right.
like in Harry Potter, if you pick your house based on your traits, it was like the same aspect. And we really liked that because it was one show we shared, but we each had a piece of it.
Exactly. And that's something that just I know, like, obviously, like, Harry Potter is this big giant thing that is, has touched the world, and everyone's like, oh, what house are you? But dang, if people can't, like, let's get, things started of like, oh, what kind of bender would you be? Because that's a super valid question, especially
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to Avatar. Like, and there are definitely characters that range from, oh, they were waterbenders but they were evil and not good, and
Mm-hmm.
firebenders who are good, and you get that crossover, but it's they've got like some of the base traits that Harry Potter's houses got, and
Mm-hmm.
it's always fun to find out. And I was on somebody's Instagram the other day, and they're like, oh, who, like, what bender do you think I am? And then people gave responses, and she responded with like very detailed information about, like, oh yes, I can see myself as that, but I'm not that fluid, and I'm not that controlled. And I was like, I love when people just get into the nitty gritty about why they feel the way they feel when it comes to bending.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I don't even know what kind of bender I would be.
What?
Yeah, okay. First of all, it's taken me 25 years to realize I'm actually a Hufflepuff because I've been like switching between Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, and like I don't have an identity, and I finally figured out that I am actually Hufflepuff. It took 25 years. So the fact that I still don't know which type of bender I am does not surprise me.
Well, I know for me, like, to riff on again Harry Potter for a little bit, like when I was in college, I was like, yeah, I'm a Ravenclaw, like that's my thing. I'm a Ravenclaw, I'm a Ravenclaw. And then at a certain point in my life, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not really a Ravenclaw. I'm totally a Hufflepuff. And I embraced my Hufflepuff self. But,
Yeah.
I think with bending, it's definitely different because when you're a bender, like that's the element, like that is what you are working with, that's what you are using.
Mm-hmm.
And then to have certain things, like to have like the water benders be able to heal with what they're able to do, and then the earth benders be able to do like metal and other earthy type stuff. It's like you do have to think about it in the terms of, well, what I want to work with, and how does it match my personality, and you go from there. But
I was just trying to figure it out based on my personality. I've always um, teetered between fire and water, and like one always sounds strong, and then like 5 minutes later, the other one sounds strong with me too. And it's like I don't know where I fall in the spectrum. It doesn't help that I'm a zodiac cuss baby. So it's true though. Like sometimes I'm a Gemini, sometimes I'm a Cancer. It just depends on the time of the day, which is why like I wish it was so set in stone that I just knew. My sister, she knows she's an earthbender because she's stubborn as a rock. She's so unmoving in everything she believes in, and just so stubborn. And I'm like, I wish I had that kind of confidence. I wish I knew as clearly as you do.
I know I know for me, feel like I look at all the nations, and I know I would definitely not be an airbender, and I wouldn't be a firebender, which leaves water and earth. And I feel I'd more be suited to earthbending just because it's, and I'm not like the person that digs my hands in the dirt and gets communal with nature at this time. I laid I laid mulch out over the weekend, and it was not like the greatest thing in my life, and I don't like getting my hands dirty, but at the same time, I just feel mentally and like in my spirit that I would be that earthbender type of person.
Mhm. For me, okay, so how I figured out I was, I'm sorry I keep going back to this, but how I figured out I was a Hufflepuff is I knew I wasn't a Gryffindor and I knew I wasn't a Slytherin. So that left Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, and for the longest time I thought I was a Ravenclaw. But at work we had this Skype group, because we use Skype to communicate throughout the hospital. I have a bunch of friends, and we have this Skype group where we post riddles and we try to figure it out. And if you, like in the book, in order to get into Ravenclaw Tower, there's a statue of a raven, and it asks you a riddle. And if you don't answer it, it doesn't let you in. It's like the painted lady for Gryffindor. And I was like, well, if I was a Ravenclaw, I would never get into that tower.
Right.
So like that was like a big epiphany. Like, okay, for sure, I'm a Hufflepuff. Like that was it. So I'm like waiting on this big epiphany of, oh, for sure, I'm a firebender, or for sure, I'm a waterbender. Like I'm waiting for that big epiphany, and I'm waiting for someone to just tell me, like, you know what? I don't know why you think you're otherwise, but this is you. Because I know I'm not an airbender, and I know I'm not an earthbender, so it leaves like fire and water, which I've always been inclined to.
Well, I guess we're just gonna have to wait for you to figure it out, and then you can come back again and be like, I figured it out.
Watch me figure it out 20 minutes after we finish this podcast. You really did it. You won't believe what just happened.
You won't believe that I washed my hands and I felt the water come over it, and I was like, that's it. I'm a waterbender.
Well, last night I was having strong inclination towards waterbending. I was like rewatching the scenes, and I was watching, like, doing some of the quizzes. You know, I mean, they're not valid, but did you give you like a sense, I guess? And I was like really leaning towards waterbending, so I was like, maybe I am part of the water tribes. And then I talked to my significant other, and we got into this fight. My temper flared, and I was like, ooh, maybe I am more fiery. So who knows?
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because you have cosplayed a waterbender, but your upcoming cosplay is a firebender.
That's right. I was really surprised my Azula cosplay was so well received, because I've always wanted to do Azula just in general, but I never thought I fit her personality, or I never thought, like, this was a time when I thought I could never be anyone from the Fire Nation, because I just don't have that fiery personality, or I didn't think I did.
Mm-hmm.
But I rewatched it now that I'm older. I rewatched the show, and I kind of feel for Azula, because she was, I don't want to say evil, but she was a bad character. Like, for sure, she was a bad character, like, personality-wise. But like, when you see what led her to being that character, like her mother being absent and her father being this evil overlord dictator, and like molding her to be like just like him, you kind of have to feel for her just a little bit, because I don't want to say I have that relationship with my dad, but I do have a relationship with my dad where I'm his firstborn and arguably his favorite. So like, no, I mean, my siblings say the same thing. So like, I'm put up to a higher standard. Like, I'm expected to be better or to do better, and the higher the higher they put you on that pedestal, the harder it is when you fall from grace. And that's kind of what happened to Azula. She was put up so high by her dad, to the point where she was about to be Fire Lord.
Mm-hmm.
But when she fell, it was just a crash. And like, I had to feel for her, and I was like, dang, I know, girl. I've been there. I've fallen from grace too, and man, does it hurt. It hurts real bad.
As a character, Azula is definitely one of those like sides of the coin of, you think about Azula, and then you have the side where it's Zuko, and they have the different relationships between their parents, and then to see how they both diverge and then come back like near the end of the series, and where they've found themselves to be, and the growth that Zuko had primarily due to his relationship with his uncle Iroh, versus like Azula being under the tutelage of her father, and then of course, both of them having lost their mother, but the mother was more with Zuko, kind of like, in that motherly relationship, and Azula didn't seem to have that relationship with her, and it's definitely something interesting to watch. And I know that because they have comic books that are considered canon that have come out after the show ended, and one of the stories is like Azula finally having like her redemption storyline when it comes to like tracking down their mother, because they find out that their mother is alive and they go on an adventure to find her.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't like the comic.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, okay. Possible unpopular opinion, but I don't like the comic. I don't consider it canon in my book. Like, I will go from Avatar straight to Korra, but I will not consider their comics at all.
And that is totally fair, because and it is something where I understand what they don't have the show, but they want to keep the story going and adding stuff in, and then you do have to ask, is it too much? Like, should there be like every answer to everything in there? And I do, as my personal opinion goes, with especially with Zuko and Azula's mom, like, that's a storyline that I don't know if I really wanted to have answered.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been nice to have just like left it vague, like, is she alive, is she not alive? You don't need answers to everything, and it's nice as a viewer to ponder and ask those kind of questions, and then have the rigorous debate amongst fans that tend to always crop up about shows like this, and as long as everyone's respectful, it's all good.
Mm-hmm. For me, the comics, it just seems, I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna get like hated on for this, but I feel like it came out of left field, like super far out of left field, because it didn't. I read some of them, and it didn't feel like the same vibes in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because like so many characters, I feel were just like either watered down or changed completely, and that's one of the biggest misgivings I think that Avatar in general has a problem with, is just that sometimes it just doesn't keep characterization. If that makes any sense.
It does. Which characters do you feel have that in the series?
I feel for sure Katara, definitely Katara in the comic books, and then leading up into Legend of Korra, because we all know how she is in the show. She's very strong-willed, and she's very solid in her beliefs. I will never turn my people back on. I will never turn my back on the people who need me, kind of thing, right?
Right.
And then in the comics, she's reduced to just being the Avatar's girlfriend.
Okay.
Like there's actual panels where you see her sitting on the side, just like looking sad or looking jealous, or she's this jealous girlfriend apparently, while Aang is over here talking with other people and whatnot. And it's just that's not the Katara that I know. She would be out there talking to the people, she would be out there kind of I feel like she'd be a great ambassador type thing, because she's already met with all the nations, and she knows them, she knows how they work, she knows how to keep people together, because she kept the entire gang together.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that she was just this person on the sideline, to the point where in Legend of Korra, she was the next Avatar's waterbending master, but after that she's practically non-existent. Where she's even to the point of being depressed after Aang's death. So it's like after the show ended, her entire life revolves around Aang, and I don't see that. Like, that's not the Katara that I know.
I respect that answer. I have not read like all of the comics, so I've read bits and pieces, or I've read enough like on like Wikipedia sites or review sites for like to get the general storyline. But if that's what they were doing to Katara in the comics, like especially sidelining her, like that's not cool. That's what like the waterbenders of the Northern Water Tribe were trying to do with her. And that's not cool. She didn't take it.
Right.
Now in the Avatar series, which we'll talk about, primarily, and then we'll jump over to Korra later on in the episode. But with the Avatar series, do you have any favorite characters? Like who are the characters that just grab you and are like, I am your favorite character?
Well, like, for sure, it was like for the longest time it was definitely Katara because I I really resonated with her. She was the one who, like I said, held the group together. She was um like the mother, and as the oldest sibling, I kind of know what it's like to mother the other kids.
Mm-hmm.
And she went from this like weak girl to this most powerful waterbender. So I really loved her for like the longest of time. And then, like I said, now that I'm older and I rewatch the show, I'm just a big fan of Azula too. Like that's completely on the other side of the spectrum, but like I can't help but feel for her. So, and ever since there's this YouTube group called Reanimate where they do live action recreations of a lot of different shows.
Uh-huh.
So like they did one for they did a couple videos for Naruto and I think like Tokyo Ghoul, and I know the reason I got into them is because they did a live action version of the Agni Kai between Azula and Zuko. And I don't know, just watching the live action Azula in that video, just I was like, I don't know why, but I'm really loving this girl, and I just go get him, go. So yeah, that those two are my favorite girls, and it always takes down independent women.
Yep. Yep, that is a good character choice. And again, it's almost again flip side of the coin with Katara on one side as the waterbender and then Azula on the other side. And those two definitely get into it on more than one occasion.
Oh yeah, but I mean, they are my favorites, but there are a couple underrated ones that I also like. But like, of course, if I had to pick, those are my top two, like, right there.
Who you got for your underrated? Who do you love that doesn't get enough love from the fandom in general?
I think I'm kind of generalizing, but I think the White Lotus as a faction is like super underrated because well, that yes, they come in at the very like at the season finale,
Mm-hmm.
but you can see bits and pieces of them throughout the entire show.
Right.
Like Iroh is a Grand Lotus, and everyone knows Iroh, of course. But then you also see like other people that you don't realize that they all have one goal, and that's like balance to the world. And they were such a big deal that they practically got their own episode in the 4-part season finale. So I feel like I really want to explore the White Lotus as a society
Mm-hmm.
because it's it's a group of people from different nations trying to keep balance in the world, even in the absence of the Avatar.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of the groups of people that you're like, wait a minute, like I can totally see Iroh and I can totally see some of the other characters like that Fire Nation swords master that Sokka trains under, right?
Yeah.
But Boomy, like that's the one where I'm like, you've got to be kidding me here. Like Boomy, are you joking me right now? Boom.
Me at a White Lotus meeting. That would have been funny. Oh my god. That's actually an interesting story in itself, like how those different people came together, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That definitely would have been like a really cool like flashback episode of let's show the White Lotus and everything that has gone into creating this group and having them just be together and decide like, okay, now's the time we need to come together.
Right. And then, like, if we're talking underrated characters, I also have an affinity for moms, like actual moms. Ursa and Kaya, Zuko and Katara's moms, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're not in the story as much, but you can tell that they both left an impact on all their children. And it's like, in that impact, that kind of leads them to who they are. Like Ursa told Zuko to never forget who you are, and he ends up being on the side of good at the end.
Yep.
And Kaya, whose death basically caused Katara to grow up quicker than she should have. She lost her childhood. She had to help carry her brother, the tribe, and then, like, even in the end, you could tell it still harbored on her because she was ready to get revenge on the man that killed her. So it's like you can definitely feel how these two women have shaped their children and how, like, that personality follows them throughout the rest of the storyline. And then even Azula, she said her mother thought she was a monster. She was right. Even Azula said it didn't hurt less knowing that she was right. So it's that kind of thing. Like Ursa and Kaya, I have a love for them both because when you look deep, it's like they're not in the story, but they definitely are.
Yeah, they definitely impacted the series a lot. Like, and as you said, I mean, they've influenced characters that their influence is felt long through those characters in the story, whether it's Katara and Sokka, whether it's Azula and Zuko. And it's incredible to see like the impact that a parent can leave on a child. And I reflect on that a lot. Like what like if I passed away or if my wife passed away, like I would hope that our influence as a parent like affected our children hopefully in a positive way, like through the rest of their life, that they could look back and be like, oh well, we did this and we did this and they taught me this, and it like that would be something where I hope for the best in case like the worst ever happened.
Right. That's all you can really hope for as a parent. I'm not a parent yet, but that's what I would imagine.
One of my favorite underrated characters is, and I don't think she's underrated anymore. I think she's actually getting a lot of recognition as far as like, especially with it being back on Netflix. A lot of people are watching it again or watching it for the first time. But I'm finding that a lot of people are really getting on the Ty Lee like wagon of I love Ty Lee. She is so great.
Right.
And I'm digging that because I love her as a character. I'm very intrigued about like the friendship and relationship that Ty Lee, Mai, and Azula have, like because they're just like three girls that just are so random at times. And it's like I you're friends, but at the same time, like I don't get it, but that's how friendships work. And but Ty Lee, and I love the discussion that people have about Ty Lee and oh, Ty Lee would totally be an airbender because of how she moves, and like I just love the discussions that have come up about her as a character overall. And I love where she ends up in the series being a part of the Kyoshi Warriors. It's like, yeah, like I dig that.
Yeah. So actually, we were rewatching season 3, my siblings and I, and she came up on screen. And my sister, she has like an affinity for the non-benders for some strange reason because she popped up and she was like, "Oh, she's cool. I like her." And I was like, "Well, yeah, she's cool. Of course she is, but why am I not surprised? You have a thing for the non-benders." That's beside the point. But yeah, Kylie, I think of the three, before I started liking Azula as much as I as I do now. Kelly was definitely my favorite of the three. She just moves so gracefully, and she fights in like in an almost non-violent way, which is why I can see how people would think she could be an airbender, because she throws punches and she throws kicks, but it's like the most non-violent punches and kicks you could probably get, because it
Right.
blocks chi, it doesn't bruise you, it doesn't hurt you. Like when you throw a punch or you throw a kick, you aim to hurt someone enough to immobilize them, but she blocks the energy from inside you so that you are rendered, you know, immobile essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not even immobile, just like unable to fight back. Because I remember she threw a couple punches at Katara and she could still move, Katara could still move, but she couldn't bend for water. And the same thing with the Earthbenders during the drill episode. She just knocked down all of them with basically without, breaking a sweat. And I do love the discussion about her possibly being an airbender. I remember I've been in the fandom for a really long time, so I remember being there early on when the discussion popped up. And they're like, well, she has silver eyes, and Aang has silver eyes, and I don't know anyone else who could possibly have silver eyes other than airbenders. And that kind of started the talk, and then it got really deep, and it was like, well, she moves like she's on air. Like she can basically float on air.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I can see her as an airbender. I could. Or at least a descendant of an airbender.
Right. Somebody that should have become an airbender, but because airbenders were wiped out, it just didn't pass along, or however that works. And yeah, I dig it. I dig it.
The gene pool, kind of gets watered down the more non-airbenders you add to the gene pool.
Yup. Now I do have to ask. Let me pull up my questions here. So in all of Avatar, you've got this journey. Aang needs to master the four elements. He's been asleep, frozen for 100 years. Fire Nation's taken over. Lots of storylines are going on. Lots of characters are moving in and out of like the team Avatar's life. Do you have a favorite of the storyline? Separate from obviously the main one of Aang needs to take down the Fire Lord before like bad things happen with Sozin's comet and they take over everything. Like, do you have like a favorite like B storyline?
Zuko's redemption. That I have never seen a character go through like, the most fluid and constructive redemption arc, because he started off as the number one main villain. Because in book one, the story was so simple. We have to get this kid to a master to master all of the four elements, and the only enemy you ever saw was Zuko, who tried to capture the Avatar. But then, like, you see, as you move on through the story, you see him having to deal with his own personal problems, his feelings of shame, and the humility that he has to go through to eventually end up on Team Avatar. And it's like, who would have thought? You look at book three, and who would have thought that 2 seasons ago this was the man hunting down the Avatar?
Mm-hmm.
So definitely his redemption. I think a lot of people would agree he had probably the best character arc out of anybody in the series.
I definitely agree. In fact, I was talking with my wife yesterday about a different animated series that also happens to be on Netflix. I'm not going to name names or shame the show, because I think the show that I'm talking about did a really good job with a lot of things. However, they failed on their character having a redemption arc, which really just was like, okay, I'm trying to kill you. Okay, I'm trying to be mean to you. Okay, I am the bad guy in this situation, and then like the last 4 episodes is, you know what, I have a lot of problems, I'm working on it, and now I'm part of your group. And it's like you had 5 seasons to kind of give that character like the little nuggets of a redemption arc, or get those seeds planted so you could build on a redemption arc. And I'm like, Avatar had 3 seasons and started kicking that redemption arc in, like at the start of like at not the start of season 1, but already like halfway into season 1, you start seeing Zuko slowly, like, and I'm talking like
Hmm.
microscopic bits of change in him, but you do start seeing it. And it's like, it is probably one of the best redemption arcs that I've seen in any media, is Zuko's redemption arc.
Right, because you like you said, you do see like micro bits of him becoming a better person, even in season 1, to the point where by the end of season 2, when he's with Katara in the catacombs and they kind of have this thing going on, you kind of want him to pick good, like, because you've seen good in him, and you see that he could be just like one of the guys that could essentially help save the world. And I remember when that first aired, it was that catacomb scene, and Azula was telling him, you need to pick good versus you need to pick me or you need to pick them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like begging, I was like, please, Zuko, pick the good guys, because I want to see, I want to see you actually using the power that you have for positive reasons. I mean, obviously he didn't pick the right choice,
Yeah.
and he doesn't end up picking the right choice until halfway through season 3. But the fact is, you've seen enough good in him. So like once you get to that point, you want him to be good. You just want him to like shove that nail in the coffin and just be who you were meant to be. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that speaks volumes of how his character was even in the early season.
Absolutely. And it's just so incredible just being able to watch it. And then even the heartbreak of him seeing Iroh in prison, and how he's like so frustrated with Iroh and yelling at him, and then their scene when he comes across Iroh again at like at outside of Ba Sing Se, and just it's just a lot. It's like, oh gosh, like these two characters, I just love them so much.
Hmm. And speaking of Zuko's character, I also really like, in terms of storyline, just like the character building episodes, not just for any one character, but there's a lot of episodes that are dedicated just to building character. And I
Hmm.
really like that because you start feeling emotional attachments to them by the time Sylvie's Comet comes. Like you don't want, like, they all accept that they might die, and you kind of just don't want them to because you're so emotionally invested.
Absolutely. Avatar is one of those shows where, and I love to talk about it, especially in terms of it is a young adult series. It is geared towards kids. It was on Nickelodeon. However, it is straight up like talking to the kids about things that you're like, wait, they're showing like people's dead bodies, like the firebenders that died, or in the attacks on like the air temples, or you're seeing bodies of air nomads that are like skeletons at this point. And they confront and talk to the children that are watching the show on a very like even level. Like they're not talking down to them, they're showing them what their actions could have
Hmm.
if they like choose the wrong path or go down the wrong thing. And I love that. And I love that in the show, even as an adult watching the show, there were times where I was like, oh, are they going to like kill a character? Like, is Aang going to die? Is he going to sacrifice himself to save the world? And like, it's a show, I don't I hate equating it to like other shows and be like, oh, it's like a kid version of such and such show, but there was real stakes and real things, and I wouldn't have been surprised if they did go down that route of a
Hmm.
character at some point during this war over the period of a year like actually does get killed to like make sure that the other characters survive and go through, and it's like it's such an impactful show.
Hmm. And I agree. It was definitely a little bit more ahead of its time, especially for a show on Nickelodeon. But you do feel for the characters, and like, there were many times when I was afraid one of them wouldn't make it past an episode. I think, what was it? I can't think of it right now, but there was like this one specific moment where I was like, oh my gosh, that person, they're not gonna make this. They're gonna die. And I remember there was a time when it got like really serious, where it's like, okay, it seems like none of them are gonna make it.
And like you said with the character, the character building episodes, or how they build up the characters that way you care about them. Like I like the interactions, especially with when it came to certain characters, and how Iroh was that bridge for a lot of characters, like Iroh and Toph having tea together, or Iroh and Aang. And you have these moments between the characters that pay off later on in the series, and you're like, dang, like they're talking about things that happened in season 1, or they're talking about this moment that happened in season 2. And it's just layers upon layers of just building these characters, exploring who they are, showing their growth as characters in a show that's literally like each episode is only 21 minutes long, and they put so much into each episode. Even things that you might see in the background come to the forefront later on, and it's like that's marvelous storytelling, not only with the story and the voice actors, but the people that are drawing and putting those nuggets in there that you get to see later on. It's just it's wonderful. It's such a wonderful show.
Hmm. Agreed.
How do you think Avatar has stood the test of time as a fandom?
Oh, it is definitely stood the test of time. It's one of those things like Harry Potter, like Lord of the Rings, that you just kind of like, it's said and you know exactly what people are talking about. And it's been 15 years, and even though it's just now it's been on Netflix, people still knew. People were still like, people came out of the gutter when it came out on Netflix. They were like, "I'm alive." So the fandom's always been, it's always been there. It's always been um just something in the background. It's like when you name, it's like in Lord of the Rings, would you have been a human, elf, or a dwarf? And you pick one. And then Harry Potter, would you have been Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff? It's like one of those things. So what kind of bender are you? You know, are you fire, water, earth, or air? It's just one of those things where you say it and people just know. If you remember, I cosplayed Katara at Hallman, the convention you and I just practically missed each other at. And there was actually surprisingly a lot of Avatar cosplayers. Not like a whole lot
Hmm.
compared to the series that was popular at the time. I remember there was a time when it was mostly Final Fantasy 16 cosplay because the game had come out.
Yeah.
But so there's like these moments like in conventions, and you can tell what series is the most popular, and yet somehow it changes all the time. But Avatar is always one of those things where it's always there. It's always a subtle popularity. There's always someone cosplaying from Avatar, and you see them and you just know it. Oh, you're cosplaying Aang, or oh, you're cosplaying Suki. It's just like you see it and you know. And even like the lessons that they teach, I still hear to this day, and it's like, yeah, that's an Iroh lesson, and I learned that from Avatar.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of those series where I feel like it's going to be in waves. Like you had the first wave, which is the people that watched it on Nickelodeon. You have the second wave where, because it was on Netflix a while ago, and I don't remember like how far back it was, but it was definitely on Netflix a while ago, and it also had its like DVD and Blu-ray release. So
It was
you're
also
getting
on
like
Prime for a little while too.
that's right. So you have like the second wave, like the second generation, probably like a good 7 years after what like when Legend of Korra was coming out,
Hmm.
somewhere around that time, where it's like, oh, there's a resurgence of people liking Avatar and getting into it, getting into Legend of Korra, and now you have this third wave 15 years after the first episode aired, and it's like more people are getting into it, and I really hope that it continues as a okay, like, welcome to the fandom, let's welcome new people in, let's have
Right.
these discussions. Now granted, on the flip side, which is something that I've been seeing a lot because I'm very active on Twitter, and I see a lot of these fandom discussions pop up, is that there are these resurgence of discussions, and it's like, this is settled, like these discussions have been settled 15 years ago, and you're bringing this stuff up, and granted, like, you're a new watcher, but we're done, like, we don't do that, we don't have these conversations, and one of the big ones is, of course, like, who's the better Avatar, Aang or Korra, and there's a lot of like saltiness about the Legend of Korra because they didn't have enough Aang in it, or enough like of the old crew, and it's like, I get where you're coming from, but that was years ago, we've talked about it, and you just have to like just love the entire fandom, just love what you love, but there's certain things we just don't talk about anymore.
Let me tell you, while we're on that topic about discussions that we shouldn't be talking about anymore,
Hit me.
I'm apologizing right now. Okay, so brace yourself. Like I said, I have been in this fandom for a very long time, and I know how deep these discussions run because I have been a part of these discussions a couple times. And if there is a one discussion that I am still salty about, and that has also left its own impact past the test of time, it is the I am sorry, forgive me, please forgive me. Can you guess?
Just rip the band-aid off.
It's the Zutara versus Katang argument.
Oh snap.
I am so sorry. I don't mean to bring shipping wars into this because it is a discussion that has been long dead and that it doesn't even matter anymore. But it's still a discussion that was very heavy in its prime
Mm-hmm.
and it was very strong. And I know this because I'm an avid Zutara shipper, and I'm I'm a very proud Zutara shipper. Okay, let's just get that out there. Okay, they were my very first OTP, and they are the one OTP I will continue to go back to. But that is beside the point. That is neither here nor there. I bring this up because you do see these old discussions come back, and I say that this is one of those discussions that have you know survived the test of time because in its prime, the ship war was huge to the point where I don't know if you know this. Maybe people on Tumblr know this, but there are ship weeks where it's like a certain ship and there's a week dedicated to that ship. There's a prompts for it.
Okay.
So it's like Zutara, I think, was the first ship that had their own ship week. So it's a week long event, and each day is a prompt, and you can write a fic, you can draw a picture, you could um, do whatever you want. It was basically a creativity thing to further um, your love for this ship. And I think
Right.
Zutara was the first one because fun fact, this isn't a bias, this is a fact. Their ship is actually more popular than the Katang ship. which is Katara and Aang. So, you know, that has been going on for the past 15 years, I'm pretty sure. And I've done a couple of those weeks. They have. And even Dante Bosco, the voice of Zuko,
Mm-hmm.
him and the voice of Katara, Mae Whitman, are both avid Zutara shippers. They have sometimes participated in Zutara Week. And I bring this up because it's an event that happens every year. To this day, there is a Zutara Week 2020. And it's not just Zutara, it's Katang. There's a Katang Week. And it's not just Avatar, there's other fandoms. Like, I was part of the Luna and Nyx from Final Fantasy 15. They had their own week as well, and I actually participated in that. So it's like, it started with Zutara, and then expanded to other Avatar ships, and then it expanded to other fandoms. So that just shows you the kind of impact that this show has had, not just on, you know, on other shows, but the fandom in general.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is my 2 cents on that.
I get it, because even again tying it back to Harry Potter, there was the Ron and Hermione fans and the Harry and Hermione fans on who should get together by the end of the book. And
Mhm.
I totally get it. I totally dig, like, and respect the people who are Zutara people. And I can see it. It's one of those things where it's one of those things in fandom where there's a lot of like random pairings at times where you're like, I don't buy it. I don't really see it. It's
Mhm.
not really in any of the show or the book or whatever it might be, to where it's like you're just putting people together at this point. But there definitely was that connection between those two characters, and it would have been a very interesting change in the storyline if those two had gotten together instead of Aang and Katara.
Mhm. I I was really rooting for them. The voice actors even said in interviews that they were really rooting for them, and it was just, now that it has been 15 years, and even though I'm still very strongly a Zutara shipper, it's one of those discussions you just don't talk about. You don't have to talk about, because it doesn't matter how often you fight the fight. People are gonna ship Zutara, or people are gonna ship Katang, or people will ship Katara with other people, or Zuko and Aang with other people. At this point, 15 years later, it doesn't matter who you ship in any fandom. Just respect the other ship, love your own ship, respect the other ship, and that's just it. I will continue participating in Zutara weeks to come, because that's just who I am. That's what I chose. That's the side I chose, and I'm not saying this to bash the other ships. This is just my personal opinion. I know other people have their personal opinion, and I'm not gonna hate them for not shipping that same thing. It's just a discussion that doesn't need to be brought up again. You know, same thing with the discussion we were talking about earlier. Who's a better Avatar, Aang or Korra? It's neither here nor there. It is not a discussion that needs to be brought up again.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of Korra, we can switch over to that show for now. When Legend of Korra came out, and I remember this very clearly. I remember seeing the artwork that they started with, of like,
Mhm.
oh, here's Republic City, and here's some of the artwork that we're looking at to do, like, for the designs and stuff of that nature. And I was like, man, they're going, like, they're jumping, which it's not really like a huge jump. It's like I think it's like
It was
50.
60 years, is what
Yeah.
they said.
So, you're going from this time period where they definitely had some foundations in the Airbender times of, okay, we're slowly doing this, but now it's like, okay, everyone's going to be using their bending powers, and we've got a lot of stuff going on, and it's got like the steampunk 1920s type vibe going on. I was like, okay, I dig that. And then then they started having the episodes come out, and I wasn't into it. Like I don't think at the time, I don't know where I was living, but it's like, okay, I couldn't watch the show, but I watched it later on as it was able to be seen. And I always tell people, I'm like, the first season I got into it, but it wasn't anything that really kicked into gear for me as a show that I really enjoyed until like halfway through the second season. And I was like, okay, I'm on board. Did you have like when Korra was coming out, was it something where you're like, okay, I need to watch this, or was it something where you watched it later?
So when Korra first came out, I did see the initial designs of everything, and at first I was very unsure about the whole Republic City aspect because I really liked the older traditional style of Last Airbender. But when I saw Korra herself, I got really excited because A, it's a female avatar,
Mm-hmm.
and B, she's from the water tribes, and not just any water tribe, she's from the southern water tribes. That's where our Sokka are from. So I was like, I really want to get to know her because I want to know what it's like to have a female avatar and one who hails from the water tribe. Because you remember how Aang was very proud of being an airbender, and he was almost too stagnant in his belief, too solid in his beliefs as an airbender,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where he didn't know what to do in the season finale with Ozai because he's so strong in his beliefs as an airbender to not kill that he didn't know what to do with Ozai.
Right.
So I wanted to see what, like, I have a love for both water and fire. So to see a water bending avatar, I wanted to see how her culture played a part on her beliefs, like how airbending or the air nomads played a part in Aang. So that's what I really wanted from Korra. I gave it a chance when season one came out, and I liked season one well enough for what it was,
Mm-hmm.
but that was because I was under the belief that that was going to be the only season. Because I think, if I remember correctly, they said Korra was just going to be one season, and it was just just to show you what life was like after Aang.
That is correct. I'll jump in here and say that I was doing some research over the past couple days, and that is absolutely 100% true, is that they intended everything to just be that one season because of how they ended the story with I
Mhm.
believe it's Amon, and
Mhm.
they could have had Amon be a much bigger villain carrying over into other episodes or other seasons if they had known that they were going to do more than that one season.
Right. So yeah, the fact that they killed him off, the fact that Korra got her love interest, the fact that everything seemed so tied up nicely in season one, I was like, okay, I can dig it, you know? But then season two, I wasn't, like, I gave it a chance because, I did enjoy season one, but I was not a fan of season two almost at all because I feel like it distorted the views on the spirit world, the views on the water tribes, like things that we had already known and were established from Last Airbender, things about these things. I feel like it distorted it, and I didn't like that. And then when she lost her past lives, that was it. I was like, this is not good. Because like that was my favorite part. It was one of my favorite parts about the Avatar, and nobody else had, other than being able to bend all four elements. The Avatar is the only one who could speak to their past lives, ask them for help, to the point where it was so important that it did have its own episode in Sozin's Comet. The
Right.
fact that Aang could talk to his past lives, I wanted to see what it would be like for Korra to ask Aang for advice, or to ask Roku and Kyoshi and Yang Chen, all these people. Like, I wanted to see her ask them. So to lose her past lives was awful, in my opinion. it was so bad to me. I wrote a fanfic of her getting them back. That's how bad it was for me. Season 3, I actually did like season 3 when it came back, mostly because they really built into Korra as a person more.
Right.
And the season finale battle between her and the villain of that season was pretty epic, like almost Ozai and Aang level epic.
Mm-hmm.
And she did it by herself because like she doesn't have a past lives. When she was doing that, she was just Korra and Avatar spirit. There was no other entity within her body helping her. It was just Korra, and she did that whole fight herself while being poisoned. So I like the story behind season 3. Other parts of season 3 could have been done better, like the whole rebirth of the Air Nation. Like, that
Mm-hmm.
could have been done way better. And then season 4, I just gave up on season 4. Season 4, I'm not into the whole fascism thing. Like, no, that's no. So yeah, I was very 50-50 for Core. Maybe more like 45, 65, something like that. I'm doing math right. 45, 55, yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. I know that it is definitely a struggle at times getting through some of Korra. There's just I don't feel the vibe of the characters. And at times like I try and figure out like, is it because they're older? Is it because the characters are older and this like got a more like they're 17, 18, 19, 20 something year olds going through this stage of life versus the 10 and 11, 12-year olds that like Aang, Katara, Sokka were dealing with such a different thing. Is it that they're dealing with like this world where there's definitely like the benders versus non-benders, the spirit world versus the real world, and making that stuff mesh? I did like I mean, I'm obviously not into fascism at all, but I liked how they did that final season with what was going on. And I liked how the include like, and my wife's favorite thing, because she did watch Korra with me, is that she loved seeing Toph come back and seeing how Toph had evolved, and how Toph is like, you know what, this is your thing. Like, I've
Right.
already had my fights. I've already gone through this
Like, I'm
whole
too
thing
old to
already.
do this again.
Right, like this is your thing. Like, you guys have to step up and take it. And I feel that really resonates, especially like with the times that we've had lately, where it's like the generation that I'm in and the generation that you're in, definitely like there is that call to needing to step up and be loud and be active to make sure that like our world is the way that we want our world to be.
Right.
And like that resonates a lot when I watch Korra in that thing where it's like at the start it's just like, okay, we got to like fix the Earth Nation, we got to get stuff done, and then it's like, oh whoa, you're not doing it in like the best way that you could be, and then it just goes downhill from there. It's like,
I feel like in general Korra was pretty rushed in its progression, and because it was so rushed, it missed out on things that made Avatar successful, like the character development. Because a lot of the characters really fell flat, and the characterization you get from them is very almost undesirable.
mm-hmm.
So I say this because the original writing people, the original writers from Last Airbender, they didn't come back. They didn't all come back for Legend of Korra. A lot of the writing for Legend of Korra was mainly came from the creators, Mike and Brian. And if you go back deep into the discussions in Avatar, one of the main discussions was that Mike and Brian, the creators, they're great idealists, like really great for throwing ideas and whatnot, but they're not very good storytellers, which is why you have a writing group. or
Right.
writing. And the head writer, Aaron Ihaz, and his wife were two of like the big factors in Avatar that made Last Airbender great, because they, in their storytelling, they were the reason that there were episodes dedicated to character development. Like they wrote and directed episodes like Zuko Alone, or The Tales of Ba Sing Se, or all these episodes that if you watch them, they're based not to further the story, but to further the character. And they didn't come back for Legend of Korra. So you kind of have to wonder, if they had stayed, would the characters be deeper? Would the storyline be more fluid? Would there be so many different plots for each different season?
Mm-hmm.
Because storytelling in Legend of Korra was based solely on what Mike and Brian wanted at that point.
Right.
And I'm not trying to diss the creators. They've done a great job. But, you know, there's wisdom and then there's intelligence. And, you know, if you don't have both, it's not gonna mesh well. And I don't think they had the ideas, but they didn't have the storytelling. So that is my 2 cents on why I think Korra is not as great as The Last Airbender.
Now with Korra, did you connect with characters as you did with Avatar, where you're like, I dig this character, or like I'm a shipper of these characters, or was it more like did you feel not as connected to them?
I didn't feel as connected to them as I did the Last Airbender characters, but you know, I had my favorites. I think the only one I really connected with was Korra, and I think half of that is due to the fact that you see her story more than anybody else's.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to almost root for her. So I feel like Korra is my main favorite. Maybe not for the same reasons that characters like Azula and Katara are my favorite. But if you're asking me about ships, I think romance in all of Avatar is just, it should not be a thing. It just should not. Because you know, in Legend of Korra, in Avatar, Last Airbender, romance was very minimal, which I can respect. But when it was there, it, in my opinion, was not great, because, you know, the main romance was Katara and Aang, and he's a 12-year-old boy, she's a 14-year-old girl, and they've got bigger problems on top of that. So it's like A, you're not old enough to even know what a relationship is, and B, you kind of have to save the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, in Last Airbender, I thought it was good that it was minimal, but when it was there, it was just, in my opinion, unnecessary or just inappropriate. You know, because I have 12-year-old relatives. So yes, he's 112, but like 100 of those years are void. So it didn't feel appropriate. And then when you get to Legend of Korra, when they are older and can be more understanding of a relationship, it just falls flat. And it's like she has a crush on Mako, who dates Asami, who leaves Asami for Korra, and then goes back to Asami in book 2, and it's like, oh, it's just this gross, constant love triangle that isn't even well played on either side. Like, neither pair is strong.
Right.
So it's like, well, at that point, I just don't ship Korra with anybody. I just let her be alone, proud, independent woman who doesn't need a man, kind of thing.
Right.
Kyoshi lived for like 300 years, 500 years, something like that, without a man. she was fine. And then I think the only couple I shipped wasn't even a real couple. I shipped like Asami with Iroh too, Zuko's grandson.
Okay.
Just they were together for like an episode, but I was like, I like them better than her with Mako. So yeah, I don't think relationships, I don't think romance is strong in either of these series. If it's inappropriate in one, it's not well played in the other. That's what I feel.
I can dig that. I dig that and respect that opinion. I know for me with like with Avatar, there's like always like that little subtleness to it, which was fine. You know, and you get it near the end, and you have like the kiss between Aang and Katara. It's like, okay, like he's still like 11, but I'm 11 in his world might be different than 11 in our world, which I look at my kids who are 11 and 10 years old respectively. I'm like, yeah, I don't see it happening with them for a while, and I would definitely hope that that did not happen. But they're not in a war, and they're not in some situation, and okay, let's just hope for the best and move on from there. With Korra, like obviously they're going to have relationships.
Right.
I know for me, especially watching Korra in the first season, I was like, okay, well, Korra is definitely the Avatar. Like, where does everyone else match up for? Like, is there a Sokka of the group? Well, that's kind of like Bolin a little bit, but not really. And then there's like, okay, well, is there a Toph of the group? Is there a so and so of the group? And you try to like first work them to see if they work into any recognizable pattern. And you're like, no, not really. Okay. Yeah, Mako with either of them, Asami or Korra, just never seemed right. It didn't seem to work, and it's like, okay, thank goodness they're done and over with.
Right. For that, I feel like they were trying to appease the fans in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I don't think they wanted another ship war, like because the Zutara and Katang ship war. I'm sorry I keep bringing it up, but that was legendary. That was a bad ship war. There were some casualties in that ship war. So I don't think they wanted anything like that. So I feel like they did a lot of things in order to appease the fans, thinking what the fans would want. And like, oh, Korra for sure has to get the guy because Aang got the girl. Korra has to get the guy. But then in book 2, they made it that their relationship was practically toxic. So Mako went back to his ex-girlfriend. It's like, if you think about that, almost logically, if my significant other left me for one of my best friends who happened to be his previous ex, our group would not survive. Like, no, I'm not gonna be friends with a guy that left me for his ex. But no, I don't care how strong friendships last through the ages. Was one of the lessons that they were talking about in Last Airbender. I don't care how long. No, it's not how real relationships last. In my opinion, you know.
Right.
Just thinking about that, just like, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That is my opinion. Because I try to put myself in their shoes, and it's like, can I watch that happen? No, I can't.
Right.
And then to make matters worse, in the romance department, they ruined their main ship from the first series. In my opinion, okay? I can't stress that enough because I don't want to start any wars here, okay?
Okay.
But when you bring up the old gang, you kind of have to see what happened to them. And the only surviving ones that we know of are Zuko, Toph, and Katara, right?
Right.
So Zuko turned out fine, I guess, other than losing his uncle. His daughter becomes Fire Lord, which is all good and dandy. But then you see Toph, and it's like, she has a horrible relationship with her older daughter Lynn because I don't know, Lynn doesn't see her as a fit mother, so they made her an unfit mother basically, which I didn't appreciate because like yes, Toph didn't have a good mother figure of her own, but you would think that would kind of, you know, kind of like affect her in a way where she would want to be a good mother. But she gave her more freedom, gave more freedom to her kids, the freedom that she didn't have for herself, to the point where one of them became like reckless.
Right.
And then, of course, Lynn has daddy issues where she doesn't even know who her father is. And it's just this big rift between her and Toph. And it's like, yeah, Toph had problems in Last Airbender, but she was only 12 too. So she had plenty of time to figure out who she was without her parents being controlling, without the gang defining her, you know?
Mm-hmm.
She had time. She was only 12. So the fact that she grew up into this woman who doesn't have a stable relationship with at least one of her daughters, it really bugs me. And then you have Katara, which I've already spoken about, how they reduced her to just being the Avatar's girlfriend. Well, in Legend of Korra, they reduced her to just being the Avatar's master, but then after that, she was just, she was nobody. She was just a healer in the Southern Water Tribe, essentially. She doesn't even have her own statue in Republic City. All the other gang members have a statue. And you would think they have statues because of something that they contributed, something that they did so well that they had to be remembered for it. But it's like Katara didn't have anything. So it's like, it's kind of solidifying the idea that she didn't do more after the war. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
And then I'm sorry. And then you get poor Sokka, who you see once in a flashback, and that's it.
right, and he's like dead, and we don't even know what happened to Suki. Did Sokka marry Suki because they were like a big couple that actually made it? Like we don't know what happened. So it's just so irritating. And then Katara and Aang, like yes, they were endgame couple in Last Airbender, and they do get married. They do have 3 children, one of which trains Korra in airbending.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to season 3 and you realize their family is not as happy as you would expect them to be.
Right.
So I told you Katara was reduced. That's a given. And she was reduced to the point where not even her children were important, which is sad. Like 2 of her children were essentially not important because they couldn't bend air. There is an entire scene where the 3 siblings are saying, well, dad favored you that more because you were airbender. He took you on these trips. And then Boomy, the eldest child, who's a non-member, he is an accomplished commander in the United Nations, but he still feels inadequate because his father neglected him because he was a non-bender. And then Kaya traveled the world to find herself, only to end up in the South Pole to be with their mom because their mom was essentially lost without their dad. So the fact that Aang was a bad father, just like how Toph was a bad mother, the fact that Aang and Katara weren't even a good couple, it's like, how did you shoot yourself in the foot that way? I know life happens and things happen in life, but you kind of have to want to believe. These kids went through so much during this 100-year war.
Mm-hmm.
And they were heroes. You kind of want them to have a happy ending. And a lot of them didn't. And that's very sad. And that resonates in their children who didn't have happy childhoods. And it's just, you didn't have a childhood and then you took away your children's childhood. That's just awful.
Right. Some heavy stuff there.
I have been wanting to get this off my chest for a long time. Okay.
Now, did you not watch season 4 at all, just out of curiosity?
No, I did watch season 4. I just didn't enjoy it as much as
Okay.
the other ones.
I
'Cause-
just wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure to be like, okay, because I wanted to. I didn't know if you'd seen everything or you missed out on stuff.
oh no, don't worry. I know what happens in season 4. I just, this wasn't my favorite.
I gotcha. I understand. Now, we had the Korra seasons, and they're talking. Which at this point, I'm still waiting on announcements because they announced that the creators for Avatar were going to be doing a live action TV series for Netflix, casting correct people of color for these roles because
Mhm.
there is no movie. That movie doesn't exist.
What movie?
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to be casting appropriate actors to portray the characters in the series. But as far as I know, because I just looked it up before we start recording, and there hasn't been any announcements of cast. There hasn't been any production talk, or besides like early production storyboards that I saw. But while we wait for that, and while we have the series on Netflix, question: would you like to see another series, another animated series set in the Avatar world, like even further into the future? Would you like to see something maybe like a past series? Like, would you like to have more Avatar, or is The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra enough for you?
Oh, that's a hard question. Okay, I feel like I would not mind another Avatar series if it was done right. I would prefer it to be in the past, though, rather than in the future. Because, I don't know, I never liked the idea of Avatar in a more modern setting, even in Korra, where it was based on like the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not a huge fan of it. Because in our time right now, war already is so real with awful weapons, guns, bombs, what have you. You take that and you amplify it with elements and people who can manipulate the elements. It just sounds like the apocalypse.
Right.
But I would like to know more about past avatars, like the small segment in book. I didn't really like book 2, but I did like the flashback to Avatar 1, the first Avatar.
Right.
So like it's something like that where you focus on another Avatar. Like I think they said they were gonna do like a comic series for Avatar Kyoshi. Like I told you, Avatar Kyoshi, she lived for 300 or 500 years, something like that. She developed the Dai Lis essentially.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would like to know more about her or Avatar Korra, who lost his love to Ko the Faith Stealer. And, I want to know more about those people. I don't need another new Avatar. And the fact that, like I said, Korra lost her past lives and she can't go back to them, I feel like it'd be really weird for the next Avatar to have just one past life to go back to with Korra. So it's like starting over, and I don't want that. Starting over in the modern day, I don't want that. No.
I got that, and yeah, I'd love to, because I know that there is that Kyoshi. It's like a book or a.
I don't know what it is. I didn't read into
It's
it.
yeah, it's definitely something that's coming out with Kyoshi, but she would be like the prime character if I was choosing someone to go back and see a series on. That would be really interesting to watch.
Yeah. So yeah, if they did another Avatar, I would not mind it if it was set in the past. And then they did do some on Roku, and I would like. Roku took 12 years to master all the elements. Like that in itself sounds like a really good series. Like I want to know, how did you master these elements?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay.
If we're talking about casting for the live action, though, I told you I was watching Reanimate's Agni Kai.
Yes.
The actress who plays Azula, everyone in the comments all agree, like, someone cast her for the Netflix one. So I recommend going to watch that one because she is awesome. She even sounds like her.
Well, I'll make sure to have a link to that in the show notes for this episode so people can go check it out. And Kris, you are planning on, like I said, you've done Katara and you are planning on doing Azula as a cosplay. So that will be exciting.
I'm so excited. And maybe now I'll finally get an answer if I'm more fire or water. Like, someone please tell me, just someone tell me, like, I think you're this because of this. Like, I need an answer.
We'll have to run a poll when this episode comes out and be like, what do you think Kris is? Fire or water? Answer below.
Right? I've done that poll, like those polls on like Instagram, and of course it's 50-50 split. Like, oh, like the universe can't give me a break, man. But then, like, I also love cosplaying. I feel like I'm more fire inclined, but then I also really love cosplaying water tribe characters like Katara, and I want to do UA one day and maybe Korra one day. So it's like, ooh, why am I always cosplaying water tribe girls? But I also really think I'm more fire inclined. Like, I don't know.
Well, eventually, maybe in a few years, you'll have a decision.
I know when I'm like 50. Since it took me 25 years to figure it out as a Hufflepuff.
Oh my gosh. Now, for those people who have listened to this episode and they're like, dang, Kris is cool, and I want to check out what she's doing, where can people find you on the internet to like give you a follow and see what all is happening in your world?
You can find me on Instagram at Tinapai, and I'm sure you'll leave a link to it. But yeah, that's pretty much the only place you can really message me. I am always open to talk about Avatar and anything else that you find interesting on my feed.
That's right. If you are a Zutara shipper,
oh hell yeah, please
send her a message.
Man, some of my best fics were Zutara fics. I'm not even gonna lie.
And I will make sure to have the links not only to your Instagram in the show notes, but also to the YouTube with the Agni Kai, and then also to your previous episode, which is episode 174, where you talked about Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts and Disney and cosplay.
Oh my gosh, some of my favorite things ever, and we got to talk about it.
That's right. Now we got to talk about Avatar, and I have to say thank you again for coming back and spending a good chunk of time with me today talking about a fandom that I love. I love so much. Uncle Iroh forever.
Oh, anytime. I am happy to be on your podcast. It is so fun to talk to you about things we both love. And some of the things I said in this episode may have gone a little crazy, but I've had them on my mind for a very long time. So I really appreciate that you gave me a platform to say it on.
Absolutely. And as I always tell everyone, you're always welcome to come back. Just let me know.
And yes, Uncle Iroh forever. I always get quizzes of which character am I more like, and somehow I always get Iroh. Even my Myers-Briggs personality test, the INFP. I'm INFP, and that's also Iroh. So I was like,
nice.
Okay. I was like, okay.
Nice. Yeah, Iroh the best.
True. The real MVP.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.